Alright, so it's 4:30. I waited 30 minutes just so that some other people can join. Welcome, Seong. Alright, so we'll get started now. Yeah, so we'll get started now. Just give me a minute, please. Alright, so in our last class, the last thing I talked about was okay, some of the things I talked about internal styling, right? In CSS. And I talked about some selectors. So I showed you the element selector, I showed you the class selector, I also showed you the ID selector, right? And then I showed you the descendant selector, right? So let me just ask a question to see if you still remember the things I said, because it's been a week, right? So that's enough time to forget some of the things I said. All right, but so when do we use descendant selectors? See, Young, I think you're the only one active. I don't know if Daniel is active right now. Daniel, are you there? Okay, so Sion, when do we use descendant selectors? Can you still remember? Can you remember, Sion? If you can't, don't worry, I'll remind you. Are you there, Sion? Okay,
Hello?
I can hear you.
Okay, yeah. So I was saying that about the descendant selector
Okay,
is is used when we have an element inside another element.
okay,
So
exactly. For example, can you give an example?
okay, for example, we have let's say we have something like okay, let's say we have I don't know the right example to it, but this one now, okay, let's say we have heading or column. Maybe for tables now we have the table, then we have the code group inside the table. So if you just want to do anything inside the, if you want to do if you want to edit anything for the element inside, that one will be the child or the descendant. Then the one outside is the parent element.
Okay,
So that's
all right. Thank you for that, Sion. Yeah. So what else do we talk about? Trying to see what do we talk about. Yeah. So we've done like basic. Okay, we talked about fonts as well, right? And I showed you how to change fonts. And I also showed you how to get fonts from Google Fonts, right? I showed you fonts.google.com where you can download fonts on your laptop and install and then use, right? So we'll continue from there to this. Let me share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen? Please let me know if you can see my screen.
yes, yes, I'm seeing your screen.
All right, awesome. Yes. So if you remember in the last class, everything that we did here was inside this style tag here. We wrote all our CSS inside the style tag, right? And this method is known as internal styling. Internal styling. Now, but if we were to be writing our CSS this way, that means that for every page you create, so right now we have just index.html, but if we had something like maybe about.html, or maybe we had another file, maybe contacts.html for the contacts page. So if you have all those pages on our website, that means that whenever we want to style we would have to create a new style tag here, then now write our styles. So now this method means that we have to like write style tags for each page. That means that if we have maybe like 20 different pages, like 20 different web pages, that means we'll have to add styling individually for those pages. So this is not a very effective way of writing your styles, especially if you have plenty pages, right? Now, one pattern that is very common in web development is that you would have one single style, and that style would be for several pages. That is, multiple pages will share the same style. That's something that's very common in web development. So to achieve that, we can't write our style like this, right? So there's something else called external CSS. External CSS, right? So that's what I'll show you now. I'll show you how to write external CSS. Right, so let me just clear up all the things we have here so we can start from scratch. All right. So learning about external CSS. All right. So if you want to write your CSS files in externally, right? You don't want to write it inside your HTML page. How you do it is you can come over here and click on this new file icon, then create a new file. You call it style.css. Now remember, I said that CSS rather is for styling web pages, and that all CSS files end with a .css extension, right? So that's why this file name ends with .css. Right? Let me just zoom in a bit. Right. So this file name ends with .css. That shows that it's a CSS style. Right. So now we have our style.css here, and we have our index.html here. Now the next thing that we need to do is that we need to link the index.html to style.css. And to do that, there's actually a tag called link. Right? And that tag has an attribute called href. Now in the href, what we're going to pass is we're going to pass the path to the style sheet. And it also has another. Now, if I've not mentioned before, href means hyperlink reference. Right? So there's another attribute that the link tag has, and that's the ref attribute. Oh, sorry, the rel. Now, what will be here is going to be style sheet. And there's one other one, I think it's type. It should be text/css. Right. So this is how you link your. Okay. Kisiyoung, you raise your hand. Go ahead.
Okay, I had the network issue, so I just came back. I don't know, I didn't hear anything you said about the external CSS.
Okay, all right. Yeah. So what I said was, in our last class, we talked about internal styling, right? Internal styling simply means that we write all our styles inside the page. That's internal styling, right? But I now said, so imagine a scenario where you have like maybe 50 pages on your website, because that's very, very possible. You have 50 pages on your website. So that means that you will have to go to each of those 50 pages and then create a style tag, and then now write all your tags inside, all your styles inside. Even if you are copying and pasting, right, it's still going to be a lot of work, right? Because you have to do that for 50 pages, right? So a pattern that is very popular in web development is that we would have one style sheet that is controlling multiple pages. All right, so that way, if I want to make a change to the style in all my pages, I'll just go to the single style sheet, and then I will change that style and it will reflect on all the pages. So it's easier to manage that way, right? Instead of having like 50 different style sheets, right? So it's more popular to see external styling than to see internal styling. And then inline styling, that one is never used at all. Like, don't use internal styling at all when you're writing your web pages, right? So internal styling is, you might still see it, but external styling is actually the best, right? Because it allows you to use one single style across multiple pages. All right, uh, so I'm using W3 Schools as a reference. Someone raised their hand. Okay, Young, if someone raises their hand, just let me know because I won't be able to see. Okay, Ricky, go ahead. Go ahead, Ricky. Raise your hand. Ricky, are you there? Okay, I'm guessing it was a mistake. Right? Okay, so Young, if anyone raises their hand, right, just let me know because I won't be able to see the um, meet page when I'm doing something else, right? All right. Ricky, you raised your hand. Go ahead. Go ahead, Ricky. I'm guessing it's a mistake because. All right, so let me go on. Yeah. Um, sorry, give me a minute. Just want to confirm something so I don't tell you the wrong thing. Okay, I think Ricky has been trying to speak, but we've not been hearing you. Maybe you should maybe you should disconnect and connect back. All right, so yeah. So what I was saying is okay, yeah. So what I was saying, I was explaining external styling, right? So to create an external style, we're going to be using a CSS file. Okay, Ricky, I think we can hear you now. Go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, you said in the external style sheet that we can only use one style tag, something like that.
No, what I said was external style sheets allow us to use one single CSS file for many pages. So we can have as many external style sheets as we want.
I still don't understand.
Okay, so but you understand the internal styling, right? What we did in last class.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes. Now, so imagine you have like 50 pages, 50 web pages, right? You using internal styling would mean that if you want to change the style of a particular page, you would have to, or if you want to change the style in all the pages, right, you have to go to each page one by one and then change all the styles, right? And it can be very hard to maintain that because you have 50 different pages. It will be very difficult to like maintain each of those pages individually. So a better way and a more common way to approach styling is by using external styles, right? So what an external style allows you to do is that it allows you to write one CSS file, and that CSS file can be used on as many pages as you want. So instead of me having to have like a style tag in every single page I have in those 50 pages, I'll have to create a style tag. That's what I would normally have to do with internal styling. But with external styling, I can have just one CSS file that will control the styles of all those pages. So if I want to make any change, I'll just go to the one CSS file and then make my change there. So it's easier to manage that way. All right, so I'm going to show you how to add an external style now to your web page, right? So the first thing you need to do is you need to create a CSS file, and we'll call and to do that, just come over here where it says new file, your VS Code, and click on new file, and then we'll call it style.css. Now if you remember when I was explaining CSS, I said CSS means cascading style sheets, right? And a CSS file ends with the extension .css. Just same way an HTML file ends with .html, CSS files end with .css, right? So create our CSS file. Now the next thing we need to do is that we need to link our HTML file and our CSS file together, right? And to do that, there's a tag called the link tag, right? There's a tag called the link tag. So we write the link tag, and then the link tag has some attributes. The first attribute is href, which means hyperlink reference, right? It's simply the path to our style sheet. It's the same attribute that our anchor tag has, what we use for linking to other pages and linking to external pages, right? So what we put in our hyperlink reference is the location of our CSS file, right? So I'll just press // and then style.css. Let me call it styles.css, right? So it can be any name you want, right? A lot of people will call it index.css. Yeah. So the link tag has another attribute, which is rel, right? I usually think of it as relevance, right? What's the relevance of this file? And the value for this will be style sheet. So you are simply telling your page that what you are linking to a style sheet. And then the last attribute is the attribute of type, right? So you're telling your browser the type of file, and it's going to be text/css, right? So this is how you link your HTML file to your style sheet. All right, so let's add an element here so that we can have something to work with. Let's say we have a div, right? And okay, let's use semantic tags instead. So let's say we have a tag of header. In our header we have an h1. Let's see my website. Sion, please, if anyone raises their hand, please let me know. Just unmute yourself and let me know. Website about.
I think Rookie is raising up a hand.
Okay, go ahead, Rookie. I'm guessing that was a mistake. Okay, so I'll go on. Alright, so then let's say we have a class of main, and in the main we have another header, and header 2. Let's see, website, see main content, because I can't think of anything to this. Then we now have lorem of 30. Right, so that's just dummy text. Right, so let's say we have this very simple page, right? Just something like this. Right, so we've already linked our HTML file, which is this, to our CSS here. So whatever we write here now is going to reflect on our HTML file, right? And it's still the same rules, right? The same way that we changed the style from when we were using internal styling. So it's still the same way that we're going to do that in the external styling. Okay, so how do we do that now? So let's assume we want to change the color and the font type of our header, of our level 1 header, or our level 1 heading rather. So how do we do that? Right, so first of all, you see that the header, or the heading rather, I always confuse those two. The heading, the level 1 heading, is nested inside the header tag, right? It's nested inside the header tag. So what we do is simply we use a descendant selector. Alright, can anyone tell me what we're going to use? The selector we're going to use. I want to target this h1, right? So anybody, can you tell me what selector we're going to use? Just raise your hand. Sion, let me know if anybody raises their hand. And if you want to answer the question yourself, Sion, you can just unmute yourself. So the question is, what selector do we use to target this H1 here?
Okay, we can use the descendant selector.
Okay, okay, all right.
I think
Yes,
Rookie was waving up her hand.
yeah. So we use descendant selector, right? So what is going to be the? What am I going to type? Rookie, tell me what am I going to type? Rookie, are you there? Okay, I think she has bad network. Anybody else? Right. Anybody else? Can raise your hand.
Okay,
Okay, go ahead, see you.
yeah, I think for the descendant selector, you write the parent element first, then you write the descendant.
Okay, so what?
Particular descendant you want to. So you can write header,
Okay,
then space H1, then the
exactly.
that sign. I don't know the name of the sign.
Curly braces.
Yeah, okay, I think curly braces. Then inside it, you can now put the property and the
One. Exactly,
value.
exactly. Thank you very much for that. So now let's assume that I want to change the color of H1. So somebody else, Temlolua. So if I want to change the color of my H1 to red, what am I going to type? Temlolua, are you there? Okay, I don't think Temlolua is here. Alright, so if I want to change the color of my heading, what I'll do is I'll just simply type the property I want to change, right? Color. Then I'll type the color I want. It's going to be red in this case, right? So if I save this and go to my browser, so you see that it has changed, right? So external styling works exactly how internal styling works. It's just that instead of writing it inside our HTML file, we write it in a separate place. And then another advantage of external styling that just dropped in my mind is that, you know, when we have, because these pages, these styles can get really, really long, like can have like thousands of lines of CSS, right? So if I have that in my HTML page, it will make my HTML page very, very, very long. Because even HTML itself can be very long, right? The page can be very long. So if I now have both the HTML and CSS, my pages will be very long, and that's harder to manage, right? Harder to maintain. So putting your CSS in a separate file makes it easier for you to manage, right? Yeah, so that's how we had external styles. And then you can, because I said you can have one style for many pages, it does not mean you are restricted to only one CSS file, right? You can have multiple CSS files in one page. For example, let's say I wanted this style here to be only for the header, so I can say header.css, right? And I'll just change it here, header.css. Then let's say I wanted to have another one for the main, right? So I can call it main.css. So I can come to my index.html and then add another styling here under. So I can also do the same thing I did before. Now if you just press link and press tab, VS Code will help you write most of the code. Okay, so let's assume in main.css I wrote a style for main. I said main p, and I said that now let me teach you about another property. Another property is text decoration, right? So like the name says, like the name implies, text decoration, to decorate your text, right? So you can have something like underline here. Okay, I made a mistake in my selector. Right. So if I save this and go to my web page now, you see that it's underlined, right? Yeah, there are many values that can go here. If you just press colon, VS Code will list most of it for you, right? So there's dotted. So I have dotted. So you can't see any difference. I'm guessing that's an error. Let's see. But I know about line through though. Line through. So it's going to cross, draw a line through your text. Alright, this is line through. And I think I know about that over line as well. Overline. Yeah. So it draws a line over your text. And if you don't want any text decoration, you can press none. Alright. Yeah. So you can have many. So you can also structure your code in another way, because maybe if you had about.html, that was another page, and then you wanted to have a CSS file dedicated to about.html, you can still create maybe about.css, right? Although I mentioned that like it's not that easy to maintain having like multiple style sheets, there are also use cases for that. I think it's even also very popular that you'd have like one separate CSS file for each page, right? So that's very popular. So if you wanted to do that, you can easily do that using external style sheets as well. I think someone raised their hand. Okay, Sion, go as well. Go ahead.
Okay, you said that we can use this external styling to have one particular styling sheet for all the pages, but you are doing different styling sheet for each
Yeah,
page.
like you have that flexibility to choose however you want to. So even if I can still come here in my about page, I can include header.css here. You have flexibility to do it however you want, right? It's just easier to maintain when you use external styles. Generally, it's easier, and then your page is not going to be that long. Like if you have both your HTML and CSS together, right? So you have the freedom, like to structure your code however makes sense to you. Right? But generally, you won't see people use inline styling. You won't even see people use internal styling is what I wanted to say. So you won't see people using internal styling at all. You see people use external styling most times, right? So you have that freedom really to decide how you want to. But a very popular approach is maybe one page then one external style. That's a very popular approach. Another maybe popular approach could be just one CSS file and then for all the pages, right? Yeah. So let me delete all these other CSS files and pages. Just work with one page and one CSS file for now. Right, so let's update this to main.css. And like I showed you, you can also link multiple CSS files inside one page. So just call this main.css. Alright, so did that make sense? If anybody has any question, you can just raise your hand, and then before I go on to the next thing, if you have any questions, just let me know. Okay, so I think nobody has any questions. So alright, so let's talk about colors a bit, right? So I already showed you how to change colors. I think that's one of the first things I showed you, right? Just type it, color attribute, and then press the value. Alright, now the value here, now one of the values that can be accepted is just the name of the color, just something like red, or maybe just something like orange, or just something like maybe green, like just typing the text, right? But that doesn't really give you so much control, because if you understand colors, maybe if you've done something like graphic design, when we talk about colors are like a spectrum. It's like when we say orange now, there are so many oranges, right? It's a spectrum. Like there's a variety of colors, right? So if you specify your colors this way, you don't have so much control, right? But however, HTML allows supports like different formats for representing colors. Sorry. Okay, so let's call colors now. Let me just bring on something. Let's help us. Alright, so yeah. So CSS color values, right? So in addition to being able to specify your colors like this, there are other ways you can specify our colors, and one of them is using what we call RGB. Yeah, and RGB stands for red, green, and blue, right? Now, if you see it here, let me just type it here. Let's copy and paste this. So here, RGB. Now, between the brackets here, you're going to have 3 values. Now, those values can range from 0 to 255, right? Now, if you have 000, that stands for black, right? And if you have 255, 255, 255, that stands for white, right? So a mixture of like several values is going to give you different colors. So maybe if I can mix maybe 100 here, maybe 255 here, maybe 40 here, it's going to give me a different color. In this case, I can see that it's giving me green, right? Now, how it works is, red, green, and blue are the primary colors, right? So if we mix different amounts of red, green, and blue, you can get virtually any color in a color spectrum. And then VS Code has this cool property that if you over on a color, it will actually give you a color picker, right? So you can choose. This can be very helpful if you need to choose colors, right? Right. So all these colors that we see on this spectrum, every single color here, you can get it through a combination of red, green, and blue. And if you see, like as I adjust the colors here, the numbers are changing, right? If you look here, these numbers are changing as I adjust the colors, right? So this is it's a better way to specify your colors than just specifying red or green or black or white. No, this is more specific, right? And most times when you're working on websites, you would have, maybe if you're working for a company, they will have their brand colors that they use in their company. For example, maybe a company like Nike, for example, will have maybe a shade of black that they use. Or if you are working with maybe Samsung, or if you are working with Facebook, right? Facebook has a particular shade of blue. Now, if you are working on a website for Facebook, you can't just go and type blue here, right? You can't just type blue here because most likely they won't work with this blue, right? There's a particular shade of blue that they will work with, right? So they will give you a particular code, right? So another way that we can specify color is using what we call X codes. Let me just write that as a comment. X codes. Yeah. So X stands for hexadecimal code, right? Now, when you are using hexadecimal codes, is kind of similar, right? But how you write it is you start with an hash, right? And then you have 6 values. Now, each of these 2 values, a set of 2 values in this total of 6 numbers, right? Every 2 numbers is actually representing red, green, and blue. What do I mean? So these first 2 numbers here, this 0 and 1 here, this 0 and 0 here, the first 2 is representing how much red. Then the second 2 zeros is representing how much green. The second 2 zeros representing how much blue. Just like RGB, exactly, just like what we had here. We had 0, 0, 0. The only difference, and in this case, it was ranging between 0 and 255, right? So the only difference between this one and this other method we're writing here is that these numbers here now, this 0, 0, is actually using hexadecimal, right? If you've done, like, I guess in maths, right? We have binary numbers, that's numbers in base 2, right? So when we talk about hexadecimal, if I'm correct, that's numbers in base 16, right? So numbers can vary from 0 to F, right? So the way hexadecimal numbers work is you count, okay, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Then when you get to 9, from 10, it's now represented with letters. It will be A, B, C, D, E, F, right? So that's how hexadecimal codes work. So if I wanted pure red, a fully saturated red, I'll just press FF here, and I'll get red, right? Because the first two numbers represent red. If I wanted, of course, you'd have seen, if I put 0, 0, 6 zeros, that'll be black, right? And if I want maybe blue, it will be FF, right? So pure blue. And if I wanted green, just pure green, FF in the middle, because the two middle numbers stand for green. So this is how hexadecimal codes work. I think this is like the most popular ways of specifying colors, right? Yeah, and this is how you will be working with colors on your web page. All right, then another method is HSL. Yeah, this one is not very common. I haven't personally used this so much, but I think it stands for hue, saturation, and then I can't remember the last value here. But this is also another way of specifying colors, right? Then we also have RGBA. Now RGBA is red, green, blue, and alpha. Right now, alpha is used to represent transparency, like how transparent the color is. So let me just give you let me just show you that. So if I had this, so let's say I have 255, 255. Okay, no, let's say I had 0, 0, 0. Right, 0, 0, 0 is going to represent black. Right, so this last number here is the A in the RGBA. It's the A. And A stands for alpha. Like I said, alpha simply means how transparent or how opaque the color is, right? So if I change this to 0.5 and I check my browser, okay, let me do something. Okay, let's use the header. Let's be a bit larger so we can see clearly. Please, I think someone raised their hand. If you did, just unmute yourself and speak.
Okay, sorry, please. I want to get something clear about this external CSS.
Okay.
You named it main.css. Does it mean whatever you are doing inside it is just going to control the main? The main, you divided use the semantic main. So is it just everything inside the main that is going to affect, or the whole page?
It will affect the whole page. Now you can name it anything you want. I can even so I can even come here and just put one.css. As long as I import it here, as long as I link it, yes, and it's the same name I use here, it will still work, right? It will still work. All right, so let me just change that back. But a very common name you see things like styles.css, you see things like index.css, you see things like main.css. Right, so you can name it anything you want. You can even use your name. You can say cyoung.css, still work. Right? So I was explaining RGBA, right? And the last value is 0.5. So the value here, this last value, for these values, they are between 0 to 255, right? But for this last value, it's between 0 and 1, from 0 to 1. So the maximum value will be 1. So if I change this to 1, that means that the color is going to be completely opaque. So you see the color at the full, let me just zoom in a bit. Yeah, so this is what we're actually looking at, right? This is the main content. So if I change the value here of this a of the alpha to 1, it means it will be completely opaque. But if I change to 0.5, it means that it will be like half transparent, half opaque, right? Let me do something. Now there's something I haven't told you before, but if you wanted to change the style of the entire page, you can use the body element, right? Remember that all our HTML that is in the browser viewport is wrapped with a body tag, right? So if I came here and I change this to body, anything I write here would apply to everything, right? Now there's another CSS property I've not told you about, and that's background color. Background color, and very explanatory, right? Is to change the background color. So if I want to change the background color of the entire page to maybe a shade of blue, right? So let me do something. So I can actually come to Google and type Facebook blue. I want to get the exact color that Facebook uses, right? So you see it here. So you see something like X color, you see the RGB color, CMYK color, right? I won't talk about CMYK because that's like out of scope, right? But so if I get the X color here, I can just copy it, and I can say background color should be this. So if I check my web page, you see that the background color is now blue, right? And I can also tell my browser that I want every element here to be white. So the X code for white is FFF. Now you'll be wondering, oh, I told you when I was explaining hexadecimal colors, I told you that the values are usually usually six characters, right? So how is it 3 now? Right? So whenever you write 3 characters, right, that's a shortcut for saying 6 Fs. So instead of having to write F 6 times, you can just shorten it with 3. Or if there's a color that is maybe E 6 times. So instead of writing, I don't think I ever wrote a copy. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right? So instead of writing E 6 times, I can shorten it and just write it 3 times. If I wanted to write 0 6 times, I can just shorten it and write it 3 times. Right? That's just a shortcut, right? And I can also write white here. But I think FFF is shorter and easier to write. So FFF stands for white. So as you work with hexadecimal codes, some of them you would remember some of them on your head, right? So yeah. So I can change all the color of the whole page to white, right? So whatever I write in the body, inside the body selector here, will apply to everything in my browser viewport. Right? But the reason why I actually changed the background is because I wanted to show you something, that this is actually becoming opaque. Now let me change the color to a green. So I can do that by changing this to 255. Now if I change this to 1, you see, like, this is the full green, saturated green. But if I make it transparent, if I give the transparency of 50%, 0.5 will be 50%. You see that it's fading into the background a bit, right? Because it's not transparent. If I make this 0.2 and save it, you see that it's fading. If I make this 0.1, you barely see it. If I make it 0, that means it will be completely transparent. So you don't even see it at all, but it's still there, right? So RGBA can be useful in that case, right? If you want to make your color transparent, background shows, it can be very useful for that. So that's the thing about colors, right? And then, like I said, if you need to choose colors, Visual Studio Code has this very useful feature that you can just use, or you can just go to Google and then Google color picker. I've already done that. So if I just search for color picker, it will give you a color picker that you can use here. And then when you find the color you want, you can just copy the X value. Just copy it, click on this copy, or you can copy the RGB value. Yeah. Okay, so that's it for colors. Does anybody have any question? Please let me know if you have any question. If you have any question, just raise your hand. Okay, so nobody has a question, right? Awesome. Let's continue. Okay, so next we're going to talk about is how to align text, right? So let's say I have this. Of course, I already have. Okay, let me just remove some things in my code. Right. Alright, so in my code I have this long, let me zoom back out. So I have this long paragraph, right? Now, if you've ever worked with Microsoft Word, you know what it means to align text, right? If you've worked with Microsoft Word, maybe on an assignment or something, on a project or something, you know that you can align your text to the left, you can align it to the center, you can align it to the right, and you can justify, right? You can also do that with HTML, right? So if I wanted to align my paragraph, right, what I'll just do is I'll select my paragraph, and I'll use a property called text align, and then the values can be center, left, right, and justify. So if I use the value of center and I check my browser, right, you see that it's centered now, right? I can also center my header, right? If I wanted it to be in the middle of the page, right? I think it's an heading 2, so just say text align center. Now you look at this, they are both center, right? Now let me ask you a question, right? So see, both my H2 and my paragraph, they have this same style that I'm adding, right? So if I didn't want to have to write this thing twice, what approach can I use? What approach can I use? So anybody that has the answer, just unmute yourself and speak. First person to unmute themselves gets to answer the question. All right, so just unmute yourself and speak. Did someone raise their hand? Does anybody have an answer to my question? Does anybody have an answer to my question? Okay, Rookie, go ahead. Go ahead, Rookie. I think there's something wrong with your network because I've not been hearing you. No, we can't hear you. Okay, I think you should join in again. Let's just wait maybe 10 seconds for her to come back. If she doesn't come back in 10 seconds, another person will answer the question. Okay, Rookie, try now. Let's see.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
So, what's the question?
Are you serious? All right. So the question is.
I was eating. I did not pay attention.
Okay, thank you for confessing. So the question is, the H2 and the paragraph, they both have a similar style, which is that text align should be center, right? So if I wanted to avoid writing this twice, how can I do it? What approach can I take?
Okay. Can I see the browser, your web page?
Okay, my web page. All right.
Okay, you can put body at center.
Okay.
See body text align center.
Okay. Yes, that's one approach. Yes. Okay, but what if, let's say, there was another paragraph? Let's say there was a UL, or no, let's say there was a link, right? link to somewhere. But I don't want this link to be text to be centered. I only want the paragraph, because if I put it on the body now, right, everything will be centered. What if I wanted only the header and the paragraph to be centered, but I don't want this link to be centered? How can I do it?
Okay. You can give the header and paragraph same class,
Exactly, yes.
and also there's another one too. You
Okay.
can also put them inside a container and then maybe a div or something. Put them inside a container and then style them.
Exactly, yes. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, so one method that you can use is you can actually give both of them a class, right? So maybe the class of, I can give them a class of center, something. Right, so these are things that when you're actually building a website, you should do, right? So you need to try to minimize how much code you're writing. So instead of writing it twice, you can just write it once and then have the same functionality, right? So there's a principle called, generally in programming and in software development, there's a principle called dry principle. Dry, right? And it means don't repeat yourself, right? So it means don't repeat yourself. So as much as possible, when you're writing code, try to avoid writing the same thing twice, right? So instead of writing H2 text align center, writing paragraph text align center, just find a way to write it once, as much as is within your power, right? Yeah. So what was I explaining before I got caught up into this? What was I explaining? I was explaining, yeah, text align, right? So you can also have justify, right? So let's say just, okay, no, it won't make sense because this is not a long piece of text, right? So text align can also have a value of justify, and those people that are familiar with like Microsoft Word will understand what justify means. It simply means that like it's going to like how do I explain it? It's going to move from one end. Okay, let me just Google a picture that explains it properly. It's hard to explain with words. Exactly. Yeah. So look at this now. So look at this. This is left aligned text, right? This is justified text, right? I think something like this is popular in the Bible. Yeah, I think some Bibles have their text justified, or some newspapers or some books, right? So for whatever reason, if you want your text to be like this, you can just use justified, right? All right. So that's it on text align. So let's look at another property. So next property we'll be looking at width and height. Width and height. All right. So if you look at my page right now, right? Now let me actually show you a real example of that. So if you go to a blog like Medium, if you are very observant, right? Blog pages or websites that are blog websites rather. If you notice, their articles are usually like really narrow. Look at this, for example, right? You notice that everything is between this place to this place. It does not take up the entire width, and there might be a couple of reasons for that. One reason is because if I'm reading and I have to read from the beginning of my screen to the end of my screen, it's kind of stressful, right? It's easier for me to scan, like when it's a shorter width, it's easier for me to read that way. I'll just have to read from here to here and then go to the next line. But if I have to read from like here all the way to the end, that's like stressful, right? And another reason is because it looks better, right? So if I had maybe a blog, right? let's see if we can create a quick blog website. I think one very popular blog is Nairaland, right? Then let's say we had the #1 blog in Nigeria. Then let's say we have an HR, and then we now have the content. So let's say we have a semantic tag of header rather, right? So that when your browser sees this, it knows that, oh, this part is the header of the web page. And then you now have an horizontal row to give a visual separation, and then you now have a main, right? And then your main is where you have the actual blog. So you have like a really long text. So let's say like Lauren 120. Right? I explained how to use this Lorem Ipsum text before, right? So let me just check how it looks now, right? So okay, let's make it longer than 120. Let's say like Lorem 700. Okay, so we have like really a long article, right? And then we now have footer, and we just say copyright Nairaland. Actually don't remember how all these things work. Just know there used to be something like this at the bottom of web pages. So just have something like this, right? And there's another semantic element called small that we use for all these copyright statements. Right? So you just have something like this, right? Now, like I said, having to read the page from here all the way here is actually really stressful and it doesn't look nice, right? Right. So what if I wanted to restrict the width to maybe something like here, just maybe a line here, a line that cuts across here, right? How do I do that? Right. So what I can do is I can come to my CSS file and then style the main, right? And then say the width should be. Now, for when you are specifying the width, you can use pixels, you can use percentage, you can also use rems and ems, right? For now, I think the basic one that you should know is pixels. I've already explained what pixels is, I think, in one of our previous classes. So let's say I want the width to be 500 pixels, right? So if I go to my page now, look at this. Now it looks better, right? 500 pixels. Now, what if we wanted it to be like, you know, the way we have medium here, where this is, although this is not really in the middle, but what if we wanted our one to be in the middle? So what we can do is we can use body, right? Like Rookie mentioned before. I just say text align and then say center, right? Okay. Now for some reason, okay. So the reason why it's not centered, so you might think that it's not centered, but it's actually centered. This stuff you are seeing here is actually centered, right? Why am I saying it's centered? Let me show you. Now, when you are building websites, and one way to like have like X-ray vision into what is really going on. So if you do something yourself and you see that this is not looking the way I expected it to look. So one way to have like X-ray vision is to use your browser developer tools. Your browser developer tools are your friend, right? So just right click and click on inspect. Okay, to bring up your browser developer tools. Right, let me just reduce it. Okay, let me bring it below, right? So we can see things clearly. Right, so right now it looks like it's not centered, right? But it's actually centered. Now, if I just click on this icon here, then I click on this. Now, I just clicked on the paragraph here. If you look below here where my mouse is, and if I click on main as well, see, main is actually just from here to here. So if I'm saying I want it to be centered, the center of from here to here is actually from here to here. I don't know if that made sense. Did that make sense? Please let me know so I can explain better if it doesn't make sense. What I just said now about the centering, did it make sense? Ricky, okay, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So what you mean is that the center is the center of the main,
Yes.
not the whole body.
Yes, the reason why it is looking like it's not centered is because we already specified a width of 500. So let me just show you what I mean. So if I remove this width here, you see that it's actually centered. Do you see now? Right. So how we can fix that now? There's another property called margin, right? But before I talk about margin, let me just talk about height. Rookie, please mute yourself. Let me just talk about height. Okay, no, let me talk about margin since
It's not me, oh. I
Mhm.
think it's the other person.
Okay. All right. So Temilulua, mute yourself. All right. So margin, right? So margin is simply the space between one element and another element. That's what margin is, right? So a way to fix this now is you can specify margins, right, for the main. So you can say that the main should have a margin. Now there's a margin left, there's a left margin, right margin, top margin, and bottom margin. Right. So if we say margin left and we say 200 pixels, if you look at our browser, see, this is the margin from here to here, right? But of course, this is not a good way of centering, because if I'm going to use margin left to center this, that means I must know how wide this thing is from left to right, right? So there's another property, which is there's another value I can use, which is auto. So if I say margin left auto, what that is going to do is that to take all the available space on the left, all the possible available margin, right? To place it here for you, right? And then, but it's still not centered, right? So we can also do margin right. So if I use margin right and I say auto, now our page is centered, right? And it looks cool, right? We practically have a blog already. Right? Now, so this what I just mentioned now is like something very, very important, right? How to center a div or how to center a section. You know, when I say a div, how to center a div, you know that I explained to you that this main is practically just a div. It's just that it has a semantic meaning, right? It's really just a div. I might as well just change this to div and now maybe give it a class of main. It's practically the same thing. The only thing is I'll have to change this here. If I did that, it's exactly the same thing, right? The result is exactly the same thing. The only difference is that main is semantic, right? And you should use main instead of using a div with a class of main, right? Yeah. So this is how you can center a div or center any element, any block element in your code. You can use margin left, auto, margin right, auto, right? Yeah. So the same way you have width, you can also have height, right? So if I wanted, now the way it is now, the height of the page usually extends to how long the content is, right? So for example, if this was just maybe right now it's like lorem 700, like 700 words, that's what that means. If it was just like maybe lorem 200 and I save, then I won't be able to scroll down again, right? Because the height of the page or the height of main is just the height of the content, right? But there are some cases where I'm trying to see if I can give you a very good example so that you have a good perspective of what I'm saying. Now, let me show you something that can I find it? Okay. this is messed up. I don't want to use this as an example. Let me look for another example. Okay, let me show you something I worked on several years ago, like 2 years ago, for fun. Where did I put this? Sorry, give me a second. Let me try to find this. I'm trying to give you a good example so that you actually see how these things are like useful in real life, right? So that it's not just using like just telling you examples that. Now look at this. Was something I created when I was learning JavaScript, right? Just a website about dogs, just different dog breeds, and a description and pictures of them, right? I love dogs a lot, so I created this, right? So now, if you look at this page, you can't scroll down. It has a particular height, right? So the page has like a fixed height that you can't scroll beyond that height, right? And it doesn't have to be just pages. It can be a section, right? Let me see if I can get the example of that. I can't think of any page that has that example, except maybe I can't think of any page right now, right, that has that. But it's very possible that you have maybe. I wish I could think of an example to give you, so that I can just see. Okay, exactly. Now look at this box. Look at this box, right? Now this box is essentially a div, right? It's a div. Now if you look at this box, do you know that the content is actually really long? The content of this box is really long, but despite the fact that the content is long, the box does not extend a particular height, right? So how you do this now is by using the height property. So this box has been given a fixed height. So the only thing I can do if the content is much is I can only scroll. That's the only thing I can do. I can only scroll down on it or scroll up, but the height will not extend that fixed height. So that's what we use the height property for, right? So let's say I had Lorem 800 like I did before, and it's very, very long, right? It's very, very long. But what if I just wanted my blog, the content to just be like from here to around here, right? So you can do that using height. So what I'll do is I'll come to my CSS file. So I'll come to my CSS file. Now, let me just show you what I did, right? Now, if you notice, this line, because there are 800 characters, so it's very, very long. So if I want it to wrap to another line, I can just press Alt-Z on my keyboard, and then everything will come down to the same, to another line. Instead of going out of my screen, it will come to another line, right? So it just makes it easier to see, right? Now, so if I wanted everything to be restricted between here and somewhere around here, how I can do that is by specifying a height. If I specify a height and I say maybe 400 pixels, so if I come here to my page, okay, now something very crazy has happened, but I wish I didn't have to explain this concept to you this way, but let me just show you this. Okay, so look at this now, right? I specified the height, and then what happened was, okay, let me try to explain what happened before. So what happened before was that, see, if you look very well, see this copyright here. Or if I just go to my, like I said, if you want to have like an X-ray vision of what this is happening in your page, just click on inspect. So if I click on inspect and I click on this. Give me a minute. Okay. And I click on my main. See, look at where main is. Let me zoom out a bit because I want you guys to see properly. Looks like I can't zoom out more than this. Okay, see. Alright, so see, look at main. If I click on main, this is actually where main is occupying. Main is just occupying from this is it, the place that is blue. Even though the content actually like reaches the end of almost the end of the page. But if you look at this place that is blue, that's actually the real height of the content. Right? That's the real height of main rather. So I think this is not a very good example. This example just confuses you. Let me look for a simpler example, right, of how you can use div width and height. Right. So a very simple use case is if I just have a div on my web page. Let's call it box, right? Just an empty div. So I can just say box here and specify width 100 pixels, specify height 100 pixels. Now you can't see anything here, right? But because it's empty, the div is empty. But if I come here and I see background color should be maroon, you'll see the box here. That makes sense. All right, so width and height, you can use to specify the width and height of a div, right? Or it doesn't have to be a div, any element. Right? So if I also had maybe main here, and I have lorem 120. Sorry, 120. My page, right? So if I didn't want it to be like this long. I just want it to be maybe around here. Stop somewhere around here. I just say the width should be 400. If I refresh, okay, guess something is wrong. Let me open it again. Okay, it's no longer box, it's now main. Sorry. Yeah, so that's what width is for, right? So if I use my X-ray vision, I inspect, and I just put my mouse on it, you see that the width is now from here to here. So it's now 400. But if I didn't specify this width, by default, because it's a block element, it will take the entire width, like you can see here. Yeah, I know I might have confused you guys a bit. Okay, Rookie, your hand is raised. Go ahead and ask a question. It's actually my fault. The explanations I did were a bit unclear. But go ahead, Rookie.
Can we give the body tag height and width?
Yes, we can. Let's do that. Right, body. So we can say we want the width to be 400. Right. So I check my browser, you see. So if I use my X-ray vision, which is browser developer tools, and I click on elements here and I click on body, you see the width is actually these blue parts that you can see. The blue parts you can see here, that's the width, yeah. So virtually any element, I don't think there's no element that you can't put width and height on. Okay, the only elements that you can't put width and height on are inline elements. And let me just show you that. So if I had, someone should give me an example of an inline element. Anybody?
Image.
Image, exactly. Okay.
You can give image height and width.
Yes. Image is kind of like a unique inline, but if you have
What of anchor?
Anchor, okay. Let's try anchor now. So let's say google.com, and we save and we go to our page, right? So if we give it the height and width, let's give the anchor an ID of link. If we say width, let's say the width should be like 600 or something very big, so that, and of course you can't really see the width just by looking like this. We need to actually check browser developer tools. So I click on this here, and I click on this. Okay, so we can actually give it a width. Oh, my bad. Okay, no, we can't give it a width. Sorry, this is body. My CSS knowledge was about to be confused, but we can't actually give it a width, right? So if I check here, you see the width is still this small width, even though we specified, we gave it an ID of link, right? This is the ID here, an ID of link, right? So regardless of the width that we gave it a width of 600 pixels, right? But look at how wide it is. That's because it's an inline element. The only inline element that we can give a width is the image tag, like you said, right? But every other one. Can you give me another example of an inline element? Can it
Yes. You can give the span, you can give it a width
span? Okay.
and height. But you can give it a width and height.
Are you sure?
I don't know, just guessing.
No, you can't. The only one you can give a width and height is image. So every inline element you can't give it width and height. If I say width of 600 pixels, height of 600 pixels, and I save and I go to the browser, then I check. Okay, it looks like you can actually give it a width. No, you can't give it a width. It was the body I was clicking on. You can't give it a width. Can you see? Can you see it? Can you guys see it on the left hand side? Please let me know if you can see it. I need your feedback. Can you guys see
It's
it?
not very clear. It's not very clear, so I zoom in a
Okay,
bit.
okay. I don't know if zooming in will help, but let me try. Okay. Can you see it now? Look at where the root span 50.66 times 18.5. That's the width and height. Do you get?
Yes, sir.
And if you also look here, although it will tell you here that it's showing height 600 pixels, width 600, but the height and width is actually not 600 pixels, right? Because if I put another span directly beside it will stay beside it because the width is actually not 600 pixels. See, so even just this alone tells you that the width and height is definitely not 600 pixels, right? Because 600 pixels is like the entire screen. Do you get? Someone raised their hand. Okay, go ahead, Ricky.
Since you can't give it a width and height, can you change the font size? Because it's actually just some letters now. Can you change the font size to make it bigger?
Yeah, you can definitely change the font size. The only thing you can't change is the width and height. You get? Yeah, go ahead, Ricky.
Sorry, the last one, it was a mistake.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so you can't add specify width and height for any inline element except images, right? And that's because images are kind of peculiar, right? You need to be able to adjust the width and height of an image, right? But other inline elements, you can't specify a width and height to it, right? But there will be some cases, and I think I've explained button as well, right? I've explained the button tag, right? I say click me. I think I explained this when I was talking about forms. So if I have this here, right? So if you can't specify, because the button tag is also an inline element, right? So that means that by default, we can't specify a width and height for a button as well. Oh, we can actually specify a width for a button. Interesting. I guess it's because it's a button, right? So we can specify a width and height for button. Yeah, so I'm also learning from this because I just thought that every single inline element you can specify a width and height for. But I guess you can specify for span and what's the other one we checked before span? for links, for anchor tags. You can specify a width and height for them. Alright, so we have just 10 minutes more. What's the next thing we're looking at? Alright, so the next thing we're looking at is the border. Border, right? Border. So let's say we have a div, and then we have the div has a width and height of 400 pixels and 400 pixels, right? So we can't see it now, right? So when we say border, let me explain that. The border is just like an outline. So if in this drawing, for example, now the yellow lines is like the content, right, inside the box. The border is the edge of the element. The edge of the element. So this blue line here, in this case, is the border, right? So if you have a div that is 400 by, we can't see the div here on our page because it's empty, right? But if I made the background color to be yellow, you can see it now, right? So when we say a border is the edge of the element. So if I came here and I said border, so there are some properties. You can change some properties about the border. You can change the border color. And how you do that is by saying border in color. So I can make it red. Alright. Okay, but of course you cannot see it now. Okay. And the reason you can't see it is probably because it does not have a size yet, right? There's another property called border width, right? And it's in pixels or rems or percentage, I think. So if I say border with 10 pixels, okay, what's happening? That's weird.
So I think you should remove the yellow, the background color yellow.
Okay. Yeah, I've removed it. That's weird. Okay. Maybe I need to add border style. There's another property called border style. And what's even the value again? Okay, solid. Okay, yeah. So for your border to show, you need to specify these three properties, right? The border should have a color, should have a width, and then should have a style. The width is like how thick the border is. Right now it's 10 pixels. If I made it 2 pixels, right? I can also change the color. I can say maybe green, right? Or I can also change the border style. There are a couple of styles. I think there's dashed. So I change to dashed, it looks like this. There's also dotted. Change to dotted, looks like dots, right? Then I think there's still some other options. Alright, okay, there's groove. I think there's inset. That's groove. Let me make it bigger so that it can be very obvious differences. Okay, so this is groove. It has like some kind of 3D effect, kind of. Then there's inset. Right. Yeah, so there are a couple of border styles, but most times you use you use solid, right? So for your border to show, you need to specify all these three border properties, and then there's a shortcut. So instead of having maybe border width separately, border color separately, border style, you can write it together as border. So this same thing I wrote here, change the color to green, change the width to 12 pixels. So you have to put it in a particular order. You first specify the size, 12 pixels, then the style, solid, then the color, gray. So if I comment this out, I'll get the same result, right? Because this is just a shorthand for this. And I can also change this to dashed, or change it to groove. I can also change this size as well to maybe to maybe 6. Right. Yeah, so that's it. Okay, we still have like 5 minutes. Let me see what else we can learn about. Did that make sense? If you have any questions, let me know. Let me know if you have any questions. Okay, go ahead, Ricky.
So, for that your project you did,
Yeah.
how did you how did you get the the slider name? Babe, I don't know how to call it. That's big greater than letter than sign that you click and it will take you to the next page.
Okay. How did I even get it? Can I remember? Let me check my code. But like, there's something called font awesome. Let me just confirm what I used so I can. You can actually just use a regular greater than sign, but I'm not sure that's what I used. So let me confirm. Okay, I used font awesome. Right? Am I still sharing my screen? Okay, yes I am. So font awesome is, I don't think I've showed you how to use icons. I don't think so. Let me just use this opportunity then. Right, so fontawesome.com is a very popular website. Right, so you can use it to get any icons you want. So you just come to the website, click on start for free, then should already be logged in. Can't remember my details. I should be able to use it without entry logging in. Right, so let me click on icons here. Yeah, so I can see things be next. Trying to think of the name. Okay, I used it in my code. So okay, arrow right, something like that. Arrow right. Okay, it's called chevron right. That's what I used. So if you want to use it in your code, you will need to install. You need to import first font awesome. Let me show you how to. So you can just go to docs. It means documentation, right? So okay, let me just show you how I did it in my own code. It might have changed. That's why. So what you do is when you come to font awesome, just read docs. Go to this place, this docs, and then read it. Okay, let's read it together since the network is better. All right, so they're asking me to use a kit. I'm trying to avoid all this. Okay, so if you come to the website, you can just click on this start with a kit, and then trying to avoid all this story. Let me just tell you how I did it. You can come up on your own and then I'll read it, and then but how I did it was, when you finally get a kit, what they're asking me to do here, when you create a kit, they'll give you a link, and that link you can paste it here. Can you see my browser? If you look here, look at this place here, this script tag here, you see something like source https kit.font awesome blah 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 blah. So they'll give you this code and you just paste it in your head, in your page, web pages head, right? So once you paste it here in your head, then you can now go and look for any icon you want. So I think our one was chevron, right? So this icon here. So what I'll do is I'll just copy this and then paste it in my code. So wherever I paste it in my code, I'll see this icon there. That's all. And then you can style this icon. The reason why it's called font awesome, right, is because you can style these icons the way you would style a font, like a regular text. You can change the color and change anything you want. You can add padding, add border, you can style it however you want, just like you style a font, right? So just copy this, and so if you look at my code here, you see it here, this, although I put inside a button, right? Yeah, so that's how you can get those icons. Although I rushed, did you understand what I explained then, Rookie?
Sir, I want to know how you made the thing clickable.
How I made it clickable? That's JavaScript.
Yes.
It's JavaScript. I've not got into JavaScript yet. So for now, but if you really want to know, you can always read my codes. I can drop the link to the project. You can just go and check it out on your own. But you need to understand JavaScript to be able to do that.